So a few weeks ago over on TikTok, Osama bin Laden went viral. Hundreds posted about bin Laden's letter to America penned in 2002, which among other things criticized the US government's involvement in the Middle East. These mostly young folks posted about how the letter changed their point of view on American politics. The resulting media hullabaloo led the White House to issue a statement condemning the reemergence of the 2 decades old manifesto, which includes anti-Semitic and homophobic rhetoric. But the weird thing is that these videos didn't actually go viral until it was reported that the trend had gone viral. At the onset, 274 of these TikTok videos got 1.8 million views in 2 days, which sounds like a lot until you consider that hashtag skincare gets 140 times that in just 1 day. Only bin Laden had a solid night routine. It could have got a lot more hype. So why does the media care more about bin Laden's letters than IV drips for supercharged skin? Well, an X thread reporting on the trend, seen by 30 million, helped TikTok views jump up to 13 million. The platform rushed to remove this content, and The Guardian took down the manifesto from their site where it had been publicly available for the last 20 years. And I'll be honest, I didn't know about this letter until all this, and then by the time I tried to read it at The Guardian, they'd already removed it. So, I didn't get radicalized this time. And of course, plenty of pundits relished the opportunity to condemn progressive young people as allies of terrorists.
For someone on TikTok to somehow suggest that this is America's fault or that bin Laden, who killed thousands of innocent Americans, was right is absolutely disgusting and further evidence that we need to ban TikTok.
So what's going on when a spicy micro trend like this briefly dominates headlines? How does it happen? And does it help or confuse the discourse? Well, let's find out in this video on the dark side of media. The bin Laden phenomenon is, at least partially, an example of the Streisand effect, in which trying to censor information backfires by making people desperate to know all about it. It's named after the time in 2003 when Barbra Streisand's efforts to suppress a photo of her Malibu estate instead made people unreasonably eager to get a look at her luxurious digs. In this case, when The Guardian removed bin Laden's letter to America from their website, it actually increased interest in the letter. So I think we should remove all of our videos from YouTube to increase interest in them. As soon as we're told something is a secret or that it's bad, we can't help ourselves. We just want the goss. The Streisand effect helps us understand why the bin Laden letter being taken offline created more hype. But it doesn't explain how this phenomenon was used as a tool by those wanting to discredit young people on TikTok as leftist psychopaths being puppeted by the Chinese Communist Party. And guys, to be clear, we can both acknowledge that TikTok is pretty sketchy while not assuming that they're pulling a Zoolander on the brains of terminally online young people.
But you can help these children, Derek, by killing the Prime Minister of Malaysia. He is bad.
What? Now, the media's overblown coverage of Osama talk led many to believe that sympathy for any of bin Laden's viewpoints is more widespread than it actually is. But hey, if you're a real Osama head, shout it out in the comments and then tidy your house because the FBI is going to be there shortly and you want to look nice when they show up. Maybe this is the next step of the big lie, a propaganda technique that, like most deeply unpleasant things, was pioneered by the Nazis. The gist is that if you repeat a lie enough times, everyone will eventually believe it. This tactic takes advantage of the illusory truth effect, or people's tendency to believe false information to be correct after repeated exposure to it. A 2020 Vanderbilt study discovered that familiarity can overpower rationality, and that repeatedly hearing that a certain statement is true can cause it to feel true even if it's not. That's because when we hear information that sounds familiar, it's easier to process and understand given what we already think we know.
And the numbers, the economic data are on Joe Biden's side.
We thus experience what's called cognitive processing fluency. In this case, by repeatedly calling attention to Osama talk, freaking out over The Guardian removing letters, and casting suspicions on young people, the public may start to believe there's actually cause for concern simply because they've heard so much about it.
It was if they were going through a script, which is something that they have to look at, which is, are they just playing off what the last person they viewed said, and they're unoriginal? Or is it something more than that?
But this case feels different because the media manifested the false perception it reported in that the TikTok trend did blow up simply because its smaller origins were given so much attention. We've seen this before, often in apolitical contexts. Marketing campaigns for products, movies, and music rely heavily on the illusory truth effect to drive interest and make sales. Whether they're annually manifesting the mediocre movie of the summer or convincing the world that cow's milk is a natural staple of childhood. Marketing history's most successful campaigns can change how people behave long term by convincing them that they're merely conforming to social norms by drinking to excess or owning enough skincare products to open their own Sephora. Consider the marketing genius behind how De Beers created the diamond engagement ring tradition out of nothing. Now, in case you didn't know this, in the 1930s, diamond engagement rings weren't really a thing. But a vigorous marketing campaign that insisted, falsely, that diamonds were rare, valuable, and the new norm for any upstanding fiancés institutionalized it as a mandatory American tradition over mere decades. That new tradition was complete with arbitrary, evolving rules about how many months' salary a man needed to spend on that rock. They manifested a new reality, one where diamond rings are ubiquitous, simply by repeating it persuasively and ad nauseum. Well, this might not be the end of the world if it leads you to, I don't know, miss out on some cool concerts and buying some hats and sneakers for much of 2019 so that you could save for a ring. It's potentially dangerous when it makes you start freaking out about a new political or ideological threat that doesn't even exist. It's easy for people to weaponize an illusory truth, like the popularity of Osama talk to support their ideological positions. Republican Senator Josh Hawley took the opportunity to denounce TikTok as a Chinese Communist Party-linked propaganda machine.
And then you've got TikTok, which is basically the social media arm of the Chinese Communist Party, and they're spewing this anti-American propaganda.
Blackboard enthusiast Glenn Beck said these posts were the Antichrist forming, and claimed the phenomenon shows the terrifying threat America continues to face from global powers. He then suggested this all proves that bin Laden's worldview was comparable to modern leftist talking points. Sex icon Charlie Kirk, president of Turning Point USA, turned to conspiracies about anti-American public education, writing, "Why is everyone shocked that a generation taught to hate America would embrace Osama bin Laden?" Basically, thanks to the outsized attention paid to the micro trend, lots of people now think progressives, and not just a small random group of terminally online teen influencers, love bin Laden, which certainly can't be expected to improve the profound, even violent sense of political division polarizing the nation. Of course, the consequences of a trend like this are probably pretty limited. It's unlikely that TikTok is going to get banned over it, and even if it were, it would really only be the end of the world for your cool teen cousin, Jessica. Hey Jessica, thanks for sometimes sharing these videos. It means a lot to me. If you could do it some more, that'd be really cool. What's far more concerning is what it reveals about the mechanisms by which our media operates. Since the late 2000s, journalism has been increasingly dominated by curation, or its pejorative twin, aggregation, terms for gathering existing news, reshaping or abbreviating it, and then republishing it. Aggregation's prominence is in part a reaction to slashed journalism budgets and the revved up pace of digital publishing. It's cheaper and faster to cull the best facts from someone else's reporting than to do the tedious work yourself. But it also has appeal for consumers. Today we're exposed to more information than we could possibly digest. As Andre Murr writes, people do not need news hunters anymore. They themselves are hunted by the news. Within the backdrop of information abundance, it is not primary information that is valued, but the navigation in the ocean of news. Problem is, our need to be told what to care about arose just as journalism faced two new phenomena: the collapse of its longtime print business model and its increased access to sophisticated metrics about audience behavior. As a result, the need to attract clicks began to dominate aggregators' already tenuous job security and thus their curation choices. As Murr writes of aggregators he interviewed for his 2019 book, Post-Journalism and the Death of Newspapers, they were feeding a suggestible audience the disgust and outrage that fueled it. Not necessarily because they shared that outrage, but because they wanted to reap the traffic it produced. They knew their audience well, and they were using that knowledge to manipulate it for commercial gain with startling efficiency. Hey guys, welcome to a new segment called Honesty Corner. A crazy thing is sometimes we will have a thumbnail or a title that's kind of aggressive or controversial, and then some people in the comments, and I think this is fair, will be like, oh, I hate when you do clickbaity things or whatever. But you know what sucks? When we do that stuff, the videos do really well. And then if we do a thumbnail or a title that's more subtle, a little ironic, more descriptive, something we like, does real bad. So we're kind of, we're caught in this system, and I just want to be honest about that. This is the end of Honesty Corner. I'll see you next time. So just as news was becoming overwhelming for the layperson, the aggregated news they were being served was increasingly based on stimulating the most outsized emotional reactions. While media has long been good buddies with sensationalism, the ability to discern exactly which kinds of blood pressure-raising stories will generate and sustain audience attention made the sensationalism ever more precise. The BuzzFeedification of the news means the reality portrayed by the media is very different from the reality we physically occupy. Unless your neighborhood is full of, violent gangs of chimpanzees and murderers and Russian spies. As media becomes abstracted from our daily experiences, it becomes easier to believe that Portland is a lawless hellscape, or that every Florida man owns an alligator, or that all the teens are putting Bin Laden quotes in their yearbooks. The problem is, when the media focuses on some small, niche blip in cyberspace, it creates the perception that this thing is worthy of attention, or even more, that this thing demands our attention. Now, of course, this assumes that the primary purpose of journalism is to direct our attention to what's most important, or to inform us. But increasingly, the media has exhausted the news-absorbing capacity of users. Murr argues that as a result, it's faster and more impactful to treat us to opinion journalism that fits our existing perspectives. He writes, "The primary requirement for news is to fit the picture of the world, not the world itself. This results in all of us swimming in subjective narratives, usually defined by what media outlets think we want to hear. It's no surprise then that, as Murr writes, the greatest harm caused by media is polarization. And the biggest issue in that polarization has become systemically embedded in both social media and the mass media. Polarization is not merely a side effect, but a condition of their business success." He cites Marshall McLuhan's 4 laws of media, one of which is that a medium reverses its effects when pushed to the extreme. For example, the technology of the automobile, which facilitated mobility at velocity never seen when pushed to its absolute extreme, turns into the reverse, the motionless gridlock of the Los Angeles freeway system at 3 p.m. Murr explains how social media's natural effect of encouraging socialization, when pushed to the extreme, reverses into profoundly antisocial, anti-communicative behavior, or what he calls a brawl. Now, he credits the oddity push, where information that is unusual provokes greater and more aroused responses, often of disgust, and the extremity push, where the most extreme opinions generated more reactions and are thus amplified. It feels fitting that Osama talk is both odd, a bunch of American Gen Zers born in a world defined by 9/11 celebrating the guy who did it, and extreme, American leftist kids side with the terrorist. These two forces lead to effective polarization, where the most bizarre and extreme cream rises to the top, causing the collapse of moderate views and leaving us with two sides who really, really hate each other. And in this case, until the media said it was a big deal, almost no one really gave a shit about the letter to America TikToks. They started the hype, and then they expressed shock at that hype. This case is particularly interesting because typically aggregator websites find things that are already popular, like videos of golden retrievers being reunited with veterans, and then ride that pre-existing hype wave for easy clicks. But with the Letter to America phenomenon, news outlets and media figures took relatively niche TikToks and used them to make their own artificial hype wave. And it worked. Now, some of the success simply reflects a new reality about our age of social contagion, or the tendency for behavior, emotions, or conditions to spread spontaneously through groups or networks. The way the media misdirects our attention doesn't just shape harmful perceptions of people or events. It leads, increasingly, to action. Unlike the olden days of the 90s, when people watched the news and then rollerbladed over to the Beanie Baby store, we have a more active relationship with the media. We don't passively consume the news. We make videos reacting to it. And like media outlets, we want to keep those videos from getting lost in the void, and thus often voice the most extreme versions of our opinions. This creates a snowball effect where people post more and more outlandish opinions, which are then aggregated and distributed back to us, creating a hellish echo chamber that keeps us further removed from reality. I know this all sounds pretty bleak, and you might be wondering, how bad can it get? While it's one thing when these tactics are used by media outlets to bolster their advertising revenue and fracture your family forever, it's a lot scarier and more dangerous when politicians, military leaders, and governments use this media-produced polarization to do, well, very bad things. It's hard to think about this without feeling pretty cynical about the media that's served to us, especially when we know it's another tool that can be used to manipulate our view of reality and even motivate our actions. It can feel hard to know what's true, what's false, and who we can trust. Except when it comes to me, your friend Michael. You can always trust me, and I'll never let you down. And while this can all feel pretty shitty, we can also think of it as an invitation to be more curious and critical about the media we consume. As Noam Chomsky said, nobody is going to pour truth into your brain. It's something you have to find out for yourself. So maybe the next time we're served some digital slop in the guise of truth or information, we can kindly say, no thanks, I'm not hungry right now, and keep it moving. But what do you all think? Is it possible to find the truth when all our widely distributed narratives are heavily curated? Will we and the rest of the public ever be able to see beyond this? You know, let me know what you think. Odd, extreme, and tepid opinions are all welcome. A huge thanks to our patrons. You know, and guys, there's crazy stuff on our Patreon page. You should not go see it. It's wild. No one go to the link in the description, sign up for our Patreon page. The stuff that's happening there is insane. You don't want to see it. I shouldn't have even said anything, so I'll stop right now. But there's a link in the description if you want to check it out. But thank you so much to all of you for being here, for watching the videos, for engaging with them, for checking things out. We really appreciate it. If you want more of this energy, be sure to check out our weekly stream, Wisecrack Live. And as always, you can find us on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, all the other places. But in the meantime, read beyond the headlines, and we'll see you guys soon.